I want to introduce you to a friend. He got my attention first. I didn't know him, but I had a young man that I was in a small group with that got a job at his company and told us there was a company in Chippewa Falls that if any of the employees are interested in going on a missions trip, they will fund it and they will give them the time off for it. I had never heard of anything like that before, but I did think to myself, even if I wasn't interested in missions trips, I think I would ask a lot of questions about missions trips. Because my first job, the only time I got a break was to smoke a cigarette or drink coffee, so I learned how to smoke and drink coffee. I have later gotten to know him, admire him, and I recommend him to you today. Give a big hand to John McBride.
Great, thank you, Keith. Appreciate the introduction. And Dave, can I get Dave, if you could come up here and get me hooked up, and I'll get a chance to introduce myself. Keith was nice enough when I was here for one of the previous meetings. He mentioned something about my accent, and so those of you who are wondering that it kind of goes in and out, I come from the state just north of here called Canada, right? And I am second generation Scottish, so I was going to call some of my relatives. If I talk to them long enough, I go home, all of a sudden I come back with an accent, and it's not a Canadian accent. So if I pronounce words funny, just ask me to say them again. But right, well, I'm John McBride. I'm the CEO of VES Environmental Solutions, Chippewa Falls. We are a Wisconsin LLC. Very proud of that, even though being Canadian, very proud. Today, I belong to VES. I'm one of the 4 founders of VES. I have Chad. I'd ask you to put your arm up, maybe stand a little bit. There's one of my partners, Chad. So he is originally from Chippewa Falls, born here, so we do have a local, make us feel good. Also, the boss of the company really is my beautiful wife, Jennifer McBride. And the other partner is a fellow by the name of Peter Farngruber. And Peter is Canadian of second generation Austrian descent. So I'm not normally on the speaker tour, just to let you guys know. This is not my day job. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about who VES is and my journey in life. And when I went to think about what I was going to say today, it reminded me I was going to a business course in Queen's University in Canada, and Queen's is like the Harvard, and I was in another marriage, a previous marriage. Can you cut that out for my wife Jennifer on that part, please? But I was taking this communication course, and everybody else was a banker. So I know we have some bankers here, so I apologize for this, but all the bankers were going to get up and give a 15-minute speech about banking. And so I went home with my first wife, and I said, you know, I really want to challenge myself. I don't want to talk about ventilation and fans and lighting. I'd like to talk about something I really don't know anything about. And she said, why don't you talk about sex? Right? So maybe there was a precursor to a divorce somewhere in that standpoint. But my journey really starts as being an atheist most of my life. I'm looking forward to the day, and my wife is, where I can say I've been a Christian longer than I've been an atheist. But today I can't say that. So that's really difficult for me. But I was at a small group just last night, and a couple of the guys are here in the room, and they said, boy, do you want to forget about being an atheist? And actually, I don't. I don't want to forget about being an atheist. And a lot of my new Christian friends that I came here, I always say to them, do you want to know how an atheist thinks? Because ask me, right? It's still up here. It hasn't gone. And I don't want to lose it, but the good news is it's in the back. It's stored. And my goal is to make sure that guy doesn't come out. But he does slip. He does show up every once in a while. And typically from Canada, has anybody gone up to Canada? Has anybody visited Canada at all? Do we have a show of hands? Do you ever notice on the late night TV, that's after 4 in the afternoon, that's late night TV in Canada. They have flowery language. They use bad words. Anybody notice that? Anybody? They use the 4-letter words. It's terrible. Visitors come up to, what the heck is this? It's what you grow up with. It's what you think is okay. This is my shameless plug for my company, by the way, for our company together. We're celebrating 10 years this year as a company. And we have a little bit of ventilation, which I'll explain a little bit more later. So Dave, can you flip? So what is an atheist? First of all, are there any atheists in the room? I'm not surprised we don't have any here. Well, an atheist is a person who does not believe in the existence of a God or any gods. One who subscribes to or advocates atheism. Okay, so I'm glad we don't have any here. Now, next slide. I looked in the Canadian Webster Dictionary because I actually was a flaming atheist. So I had to look up what is the Webster Dictionary definition for flaming atheist, and I found a picture. You know, it's not that often they actually put a picture, so at least you can visualize what a flaming atheist looks like. An atheist who likes to debate with believers that the existence of God is a myth. Their goal is to convert them to atheism. And 60 pounds earlier, that is me. That is a picture of me in my prime flaming atheism, right? So you can see that evil look in the eyes, you know, those things now as Christian. So beware of that look, okay? Just beware that that individual may come upon you, so. All right. So why was I an atheist? I grew up in an alcoholic house. My father was a drill sergeant, sort of the equivalent of the Canadian Green Berets. Every 6 weeks he'd turn out another group. They would come and celebrate in our home. We would have to clean out the tub because it was full of puke and booze and everything was all over the place. Pornographic videos. No talk of religion except using the Lord's name in vain, which is not good. And later in life, as I started interacting with business people, I just didn't see good people. And if they were Christians, they said, I'm going to send you the bill. You can trust me, I'm a Christian. Just send me another shipment, get it out. I got it out the door, and I never saw the other bill, and I never saw the payment for that. So I had some difficult times thinking, what is a good person, right? Does anybody know what a 50-mile Christian is? You don't, because there's no atheists in here. So I'm going to tell you how atheists talk. We talk about 50-mile Baptists, 50-mile Christians, 50-mile Jews. We just don't hold it to any religion. And what that is I would be doing trade shows. And I'm going to use an area that's not here so I don't get myself. I'm in North Carolina. I've got customers in North Carolina. They meet me in Atlanta. When I visit them in North Carolina, they say, why don't you come to church with me and stuff? And I'm an atheist, so I came up with some good excuses why I couldn't be there at that time. But I'm thinking these are really religious people. Then I meet them at the Atlanta Poultry Trade Show, also known as the Chicker Plucker Show. I don't know if anybody's been to the Chicker Plucker Show. Yeah, we got one hand, thank you. Well, these people would show up, and then we're sitting down, and they'd say, well, where are we going tonight? And I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I take a Christian for dinner? And I'm trying to look at the guide, because we didn't have our phone that we could get on the phone and say, where's the best place for dinner? It was the old way. And so I said, where do you want to go? Well, I want to go to the Cheetah Club. What's the Cheetah Club? Oh, they got over 100 girls there. And I'm like, I thought you were Baptist. I'm a 50-mile Baptist. I'm like, what's that? Well, I'm a Baptist as long as I'm 50 miles from home. And once I get outside of 50 miles, I don't have to be a Baptist anymore. Right? And then I started doing business in China in 1981. Mainly Hong Kong and Taiwan. Then I moved into China in 86. I traveled in the late 80s into China. And it's a different culture. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of atheists over there. But I remember my pastor told me a story one time that God loves the Chinese people more than any other race. Did you guys know that? You guys are shocked. Why would he make so many of them? Right? He loves them. He loves them. So my years of developing business, going through business, I was really taken under wing by many mentors. And I was really surprised because I spent most of my life, because my father left at 14, on welfare, right? So from 14 to 19, I lived on welfare alone with my mother. And we'd have to go out and collect bottles in the ditch. I don't know if you guys remember when you could go out and you could collect bottles and go door to door. You could get $4 or $5. You get enough money to go to a show. It was incredible. So that's how I made it. I cut grass. I shoveled driveways. I used to go around the village and I'd shovel everybody's driveway. About 20% of them would pay me. But that didn't matter. I needed money. You know, you just had to do stuff. So I went at the chicken plucker show and I listened to the speaker one time. And he was an astronaut that landed on the moon, one of the last astronauts. And he was telling a story about, they were really cowboys in NASA. Those guys were hard drinkers, hard partiers and stuff. And he started talking about businessmen, and all these businessmen were in the room. And he says, you know, when he was an astronaut, he was partying. His god was alcohol. His god was womanizing. And he says, and then he sees businessmen where their god is money. And finally, as an atheist, I now had a term. I had a term that I could use to explain why all these business people I knew were so focused on money, and they would do anything they could to get enough of their God. And if your God is pornography, drugs, alcohol, money, you can't get enough of your God. And all of a sudden I saw in businesses, coming through this business life, being mentored, that businessmen were all telling me, how can I go around the system? How can I dive into the gray area of life? How can I mislead employees? How do I promise them they'll get shares in the company only to see them work so many hours, right? And then never come through, always coming up with an excuse of, oh no, it's too complicated, my lawyer said I can't do it, many reasons. So business owners, their God was money. Okay. So what changed me, right? Well, we know it was God. But the first step was I met a woman. I met a Wisconsin woman. Anybody else here met a Wisconsin woman? Do we have any? All right, good. I wasn't the first. Okay, I wasn't the first. And the good news for Chad, because I was living part-time in his basement, he was like, I'm glad, you know, he got out of a divorce with a woman. Is this guy really an okay guy? So Chad was happy to see that I found a woman. And she was a Christian woman. I didn't know that, but we both were going through divorces and we're talking about our life. And she is really professing her love for God, you know? And she told me she would never marry a man who was not a Christian. Shoot, man, I'm like, this dating thing is not going to be cracked up, because I'd been out of the market for about 17, 18 years. And she told me something I'd never heard in my life. She told me that she loved God, and that she loved God more than me. So if we go back to the picture of that atheist, if you want to really make an atheist angry, tell him you love God, right? Because an atheist is going to tell you, there can't be a God. I can't touch him. I can't feel him. And you're going to say, well, do you love your mother? Yes, I love my mother. Can you touch that love? You can touch your mother, but you can't touch the love, right? So I'm sitting there going, shoot, next one. And so I said, I'll go to church with you. You know, I loved her. I said, look, I will go to church. You pick a church. I will go with you, but I'm not going to tell you that I believe when I don't. She went to about 10 churches. I'm flying around the world, China, UK, and she goes to the church. I come back, we try it. It's not comfortable. It took 10 churches. Finally, she says, I found a church. She goes, you can wear your shorts, you can put on your sandals, you get a coffee at the door. They put the music up because I don't know any of these Christian songs, you know. They don't play those on Atheist channels at all. So these Christian songs, although I do know some of the old hymns. The old hymns, I do know a few of them. But she finally found a church. She says, look, I don't care if you don't like this one. I'm going to this one. And I went there in my sandals, in my shorts, picked up my coffee, went in. My wife, just so you know, looks a little bit younger than me. So people looked at us a little funny. I know Carl did. I don't know if everybody did, but I remember Carl looked at us kind of funny. Is that her father? Is that her uncle? What's going on here? And the other thing, I enjoyed the message. There was some humor in the message, you know. And the pastor was 6'7", so it, you know, it kind of carried pretty good. But I really enjoyed the message. Okay. And I was going through the motions of church. I was so proud of myself, you know. I told Jennifer I'd give it a try. I'm going there, I'm singing the songs, and I'm singing loud. I'm singing loud and proud because the words are up there. And actually, some of these songs are a little catchy. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. You know, some of the tunes are a little catchy. And some of them, I think they play on Atheist radio, but I think they change the words sometimes because they don't want to have some of those God words in there. So, and then came time, and I've got my new pastor with me, and he says, let's pray. And everybody closes their eyes, and they go to pray. Well, that was my opportune time to start thinking about my family back home in Canada, thinking about where I got to travel next, what am I going to do in business, did I let the dog out before we came to church? Those were the things going through my mind. And one day, the pastor said, and let's start to pray. And then he stopped. And he said, for those of you who start to think about your family in Canada, right? Now, he was born in Canada, so the first sentence didn't really jump at me, right? When you think about your business, when you start thinking about other things, and you don't pray, the guilt that overwhelmed me was incredible. I got caught. I promised Jennifer that I would give this an honest effort, and I was going through the motions, and I got caught. So, Pastor Kim, thank you, and Father, thank you. So this is my testimony, and I think this is something that I would like all of you to join me in, because I think it's important. So, once Pastor Kim said, for those of you thinking of your family in Canada, those of you who are thinking about business and stuff, today I want you to pray this simple prayer. So, he said, I want you to think about the people who you have hatred in your heart. So please, take a few seconds now. Let's reflect upon people who we have hatred in our heart. Okay? And I want you to start putting those names through your head, those individuals, those circumstances. And I want you to pray this simple prayer that he asked me, my very first prayer. Father, lift the hatred from my heart. My very first prayer. Right? Very simple. Father, lift the hatred. well, the ground started to shake and my body started, no, there was none of that. It was, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought. A couple weeks later, I go to a show. What do? I see people at a show that's in business. Typically, who do you have a few hatred spots for? People in business, your competitors. And I came up to them. And I'm waiting to have that feeling you get in your stomach when you see somebody you don't like. There's nothing there. And I saw one. And the next day I saw two. And then I saw four. And I had no feeling of hatred. I'm like, oh shoot. There is something to this. There is something to this. The crack of the door opened, right? The crack of the door opened, right? And then Satan was angry. He lost one of his best men. I was converting them left and right. Right? I was a good flaming atheist. I'll have to tell you guys, I was pretty good. I was pretty good. I don't know, Chad, do you remember, was I pretty good? Actually, my sister on her deathbed, and she found Christ. She said to me, you converted my daughters to be an atheist. It's your job to convert them back before you die. That is a hard one. That was a hard one. So, Satan was angry. The Lord started surrounding me. And that's, I think, my biggest surprise. And I'm going to say it must be Wisconsin people and not Canadian people. But I started finding some really good people at the church. And I was watching them. Because they're going to slip. Because everyone I knew would slip. And they would slip as soon as they got to mile marker 51. They were slipping. So there was one that convinced me to go on a mission trip. Right? And I'm thinking, it's Honduras. He is going to go beyond mile marker 51. I want to see what this guy can do. And then there wasn't just one of them, there was a couple of them. And I went down to Honduras. And actually, I liked them better in Honduras. Right? They were letting things flow more openly than even what they did. They were a little bit reserved. They were reserved, but good guys. Two of them are here tonight, so they're wondering what I'm going to do about them. But don't worry, Bill and Carl. Excuse me. All right. So the Father was training me. He had been training me all my life. So, what is VES? VES Environmental Solutions. It's 4 friends that got together that never owned a business, right? And we've all worked for other people, and we said, we know what we don't like about business. So let's build something that we do like. And 2 of us started it. I brought Chad because Chad and I started VES in the bedroom, right? Just the 2 of us sitting side by side. Somebody would call in. Is John there? Let me put you on hold. Right, here. Then we had to send a fax. Anybody remember a fax? Right? We had to send a fax, so we had to unplug the phone and plug the fax in and send it through. Right? And if we were going to start a business, we said, we don't have millions and millions of dollars. We got to find a niche. And we thought the dairy industry. Well, Wisconsin's a good place to start the dairy industry. And we looked at all the research and our background from ventilation, and we said, look, at the research is terrible. I don't think somebody has taken it serious to help the dairy farmer out and create a better environment for the dairy cows. So the inspiration, how do we bring the best day that God provided, right? This flaming atheist becoming a flaming Christian. Starting a business based on what God did, right? God provides this beautiful blue day, fresh air, gentle breeze. If you can now imagine I think there's some dairy guys in here. Chuck, you can imagine this, right? The dairy cow is lying slightly uphill, facing uphill. They never face down, facing uphill. Gentle breeze, beautiful sun, great color, okay? And that was it. So we started the business. And then Carl happened. And Carl's here today. But I come home one night and my wife says, I had a dream last night. And God told me we needed to hire Carl. And I'm like, well, who's Carl? Well, he's one of our temp guys that started out in the business. I said, well, if God's telling you I should hire him, I think I'm going to take him out for lunch tomorrow. So I then take Carl out for lunch. So Carl, could you put up your hand? So this is Carl. So Carl is having lunch with me, and I'm asking, tell me about your background, where you're from, and all of a sudden these things. And then Carl goes, by the way, God told me I'm supposed to work for you and your company. So I'm a little slow. I haven't quite told you guys yet. How many years did it take to become a Christian? 46, 47, takes a little bit of time. God wants me to hire this guy. He has to go into my wife's dreams. He has to go to the individual and say, look, God wants me to. So I was listening. Right? Okay. So my personal journey with God was developing this company with some partners, really trying to understand my relationship, right? And I remember we had a sales meeting. We brought customers in, and we started the morning. My wife is at the very back, and I'm standing at the very front. I said, well, let's start this meeting with a devotional. Well, 3 of the guys who knew me started laughing because they were waiting for my joke. You know, they were waiting for the joke to come out. And there wasn't a joke, and my wife has a shocked look on her face because I've never talked that way. And all of a sudden, I gave a devotional. We got done. We broke for lunch. This gentleman came over to me. He said, I am so glad I picked your company to work with, right? And then we just expanded that to having a huddle, having a prayer. By the way, Carl is actually our company pastor. I don't know, how many of you guys have a company pastor? There. Thank you, Chad. We have a company pastor, right? We openly pray for people. We tell the employees, you do not have to be here during prayer. If you're uncomfortable, you can leave. There's no ramifications. Nobody has left here to date. We pray for people. We asked who is sick, who needs help, right? And that's what I learned as I traveled around the world, and I'm sitting at a meeting with the number 2 guy at Nestle. Everybody know who Nestle is? A company out of Switzerland, multi-billion-dollar company. We're sitting down at a table in Beijing, and we're, 120 people. And I stood up, I said, do you people mind if I start the dinner with a prayer? Well, I can tell you the shocked look on all the Chinese people, right? But I prayed. I prayed for the industry. I prayed for the people there. People were shocked, right? That's called boldness, right? That's called boldness. All right. And when I learned to rely on the Father, because my atheist friends go, how do you deal with the pressures? We just added 25% tariffs onto 75% of our products. How do you deal with that pressure? You rely on the Father, right? You rely on what He has planned for you and what He's going to do for you. Okay. So, what is a Christian business? Because I get asked that, because I really let people know. And I got an antidote. I was sitting down with this Chinese company, and they were giving me a presentation, and quite often the English translation is terrible. And at the end of it, it said on the bottom, it said, and we are a Christian-based company. Well, I thought somebody really screwed up on that translation. We're a Christian-based company in China. Got to be kidding. So I said to the one guy who was giving the presentation, well, tell me, what is your favorite part of the Bible? And he says, I love Job. Job is really good. Right? And so I asked him to explain it. They actually had 2 nuns working. And it was a Christian-based Chinese company. So I asked them, how many people are in your church? Their church was 130 years old in China. How many people in your church? 2,000. Right? You can't have a church in China. We all know that, right? It's not true. It's not true. So I said to them, how do you do this? They said, if you're going to have a meeting of more than 3 people in China, you let the government know. The government doesn't like 2,000 people getting together to have a talk, because they think you're going to talk about them and there's going to be a problem. They've actually invited them to the church, right? Owners that try to act like Christ. How do we treat people well? That's the thing. And I learned, pray, pray, pray. Every morning I pray on the way to work. I pray for the right words. I pray for wisdom. I pray for the health of the employees. I pray for my enemies. I can't believe you Christians pray for your enemies. It's terrible. So once he lifted the hatred from my heart, of course I have to pray for them, right? I got to pray for my enemies. I like it though. You know, it's really growing on me, type of thing. Sharing the victories. You know, if you get the right environment and people buy in, it's a team. In a company, there's a team. And as a business guy running, having almost 500 employees, I tried to run it like a general. The company was very successful. They made a lot of money, but I didn't see a lot of happy employees, right? We need happy employees. We need to treat them. Is there any millennials in here? Do we have any millennials? Yeah. Nick, don't be shy. Put it all the way up. We have a millennial. You know, I was at a peer group and everybody to talk. How do we deal with millennials? Right? We should be having to. How do we deal with the atheists? Millennials are the same thing that they said about the baby boomers. I was a baby. What are we going to do about the baby boomers? You treat people with respect. You treat people with love. Right? You will learn how to deal with people. And if I met Nick, he works for us, he's joined us. I don't think he's a millennial. He's just a good guy. He's just a good guy who's in love with God, right? So him and I, he comes over, we're in China at our apartment in China, and I just really had been there, what, 2 weeks? Nick, 3 weeks? So we get up in the morning, I said, well, let's have some devotionals. Just joking. And he pulls out his Bible, he's all ready. He's waiting for me. He was waiting for me. I thought, you snot-nosed kid, making me look bad in front of the God. Yeah, not professional. I was trying to find out what school he went to, and they got to change that course at North Dakota. So, you know, and be bold. And that's, I have to thank Pastor Kim from Harvest Time. He really preaches this. Pastor Carl, my new pastor, really preaches it. Be bold. Be bold, right? Be bold with your employees. Be bold with your suppliers. Every meal, I pray, doesn't matter who's with us. I say, can I give a blessing? No one has said no. Nobody has got up and walked. And I don't say good bread, good meat, good gracious, let's eat, right? I think about who am I with? What are they going through? What can I pray that is fervent prayer from my heart to make a difference? Okay. And I hope may God bless each and every one of you. And I have one more slide. And Scripture is not my strength, so I will admit that Pastor Carl, so I got 2 Pastor Carls, one at Harvest Time Chippewa and one at business, so it makes it easy for me when I slip. I just sort of said to our company pastor, I said, Scripture is not my strength, but I think, can you help me with some things that can help business people who work for companies, how can help them? The greatest among you shall be like the youngest, and the ones who rules like the one who serves. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, right? O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body belongs to you. As we struggle at work, as we run into cash flow issues, when we run into customers who don't pay their bills, when we get misled by employees about what's going on and why that machine's breaking down, we need to reach out. We need to intertwine our business, not just church. My company is a church, right? It is not my business. The government of Wisconsin has forced Chad and Jennifer and Peter and I to put our signatures on a piece of paper that says somebody here on earth has to vouch for VES as a company. Luckily we did that. But my business belongs to the Lord, right? And we give away the profits. Our goal, we want to give it all away. But when you're growing 40% every year, it's kind of tough to peel off some money and give it away. So today, VES, I think we're up to 60 countries. I'm off to Europe on Saturday. I'm over to Qatar on 5 days later. A couple weeks, Nick, maybe Chad and I will be heading back to China. Maybe Dave will come with us. We're all around the world. VES is recognized more around the world than we are here in our backyard. So we haven't done a good marketing job itself. So thank you. There's so many men in this room that have influenced me, helped me along my journey as a Christian. And I leave you with one last story. As I became this crazy Christian and they started talking about gifts and all these other things, and I'm like, I gotta have a gift. My gift can't be an atheist. That's not a gift, right? What is my gift? I'm having friends that are suffering with cancer. Jennifer is over in Thailand. We're sponsoring homes to bring kids out of the sex trade, 3 to 4 years of age. Just terrible, terrible. Jennifer's got a gift. She's got the most incredible heart I've ever seen. I'm giftless. What is my gift? And I'd been praying and praying. And then sure enough, I call on a dairyman. And I show up there and I help him with his ventilation and I help him with his lighting and cooling and stuff. And I said, do you understand what I think we should do? We said, yeah. He says, well, now let's talk about why you're really here today. And I'm like, I'm here. And I wasn't supposed to be there. There actually was a sales guy that was supposed to go that day. And he called me sick. He says, can you take my sales call for me today? And I miss sales, so I don't mind when somebody asks me if I want to get out into the sales side. And so I show up and this guy says to me, let's talk about why you're really here today. And I'm like, I'm here to help you with the ventilation for your animals. That's my strength. He goes, no, you've been asking God about what your gift is, and he told me last night to tell you what your gift is. Right? So you see the theme about this atheist is slow. This guy needs to be hit over the head, right? So I said to him, okay, what's my gift? He says, you're an intercessor. That sounds like incest in Canada. Intercessor, incest. I'm like, that's not a gift. That's not a gift, right? He says, I said, what is it? He goes, it's a good thing. Trust me, it's a good thing. I said, well, can't you tell me what it is? He said, nope, God just told me to tell you what your gift was, and that was it. And he looked at me and he says, I am shocked, you know? Okay. He said, well, here's some verses. And he says, when you pray, can you pray for hours? I said, I can pray for hours. I actually can pray for days. I can just go off. And when I'm in this apartment over in China, and there's nothing better to do, I just pray. He says, when you pray, do tears run down your eyes? I said, they do, it just flows. He says, does snot run out of your nose and pile up on a table? 3 days before that, I was praying for a friend. Tears were flowing, we prayed for hours. And he said, and the snot pile up on grandma's table. And then my friend, I said, I'm sorry, is this about this table? He goes, it's okay, it's my grandma's table. So this guy confirms me, well, God, maybe this guy may not believe that I told this guy to tell you your gift. I'm going to give an example to tell you this message really comes from God. This is not a real coincidence. So he said, when you pray, does your body shake? And for some of you, if I pray with you and it starts to shake, I am not having a heart attack. All right? So it was really uncomfortable. It took me a while, because when I really prayed for people fervently, and that's what an intercessor does. I pray for people. I have no idea. I pray for circumstances. This is my gift. I pray for my business. I pray for my workers. I prayed for each and every one of you today, even though I didn't know you were here. I prayed for the circumstance. And I pray, most of all, that you make sure in your lives and in your business that you include God in every part of your day. How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? Right? All of those things. And I said the last one was the last one. There's one more story I have to tell you, because God thinks I'm slow. My wife and I, because I'm 58 years of age and my wife is young, neither of us had children. So we want to have children in our second marriage, and it was difficult. My wife said to the gynecologist, is it because John's sperm is so old that we can't get pregnant? And she said, no, it's because your eggs are old. And my wife had 7 miscarriages, right? 7. We tried. Thing about a flaming atheist, they're very persistent. And so we were pushing, and my wife said, this one is the last one. We had a boy, and her sister had 2 boys, so there were no girls in the family. And lo and behold, we go for the first ultrasound, it's a girl, but my wife really doesn't want to talk about it because there's been so many miscarriages. And then finally things are going good. We're in the hospital, ready for the delivery, and all of a sudden, 100 nurses, it seemed. I was pushed against the back wall. There was a silent alarm. They're picking my wife up, they're flipping her over. All of a sudden they're putting a screw into the head of my daughter. They don't know what's going on. There's a ticker tape. I'm at the very back. And there's a Bible sitting there. I pick it up, I let the Bible fall open, and I start to pray. Right? And then things calm down. The doctor says, we better start preparing for a C-section. It doesn't look good. And then the doctor would leave. She came back. She looked at the ticker tape. She left. She came back. And I'm like, get going. It's an emergency. You got to get going. And Jennifer was on her side, and she said, lift Jennifer's leg up. She had the epidural, so she couldn't lift up her legs herself. So I lift up Jennifer's legs. And the head was starting to crown. And I turned around. The doctor changed from street clothes into a gown. And again, the nurses come running in. It's a rush. And the doctor's reaching in. Don't want to be too descriptive here. Doctor's reaching. All of a sudden, I see the doctor start to uncoil the umbilical cord from around our daughter's neck. Right? Daughter was born, and the umbilical cord was thinned out. If it didn't get thinned out, she would have been dead. So she latches on. Things look really good. 3 hours later, she throws up. She's throwing up bile. It's not good. My wife says, I can't lose another one. I can't. So, go down. They do an upper GI. I won't let her go. The guy says, you got to take your hands away. We're doing the x-rays. You got to take your hands away. I said, I'm not taking the hands away from my daughter. Right? I could see it go down. The guy says, I'm not supposed to show you. It's not my job. But the last 6 inches of her intestines are missing. It says it grows from the stomach out to the rectum. Now, the good news is they talked about a colostomy bag. It wasn't a death sentence. It was, here's a problem. We're going to have to take you to the cities. We're going to put a colostomy bag on. Right? Your daughter may have to have it. It may just grow naturally. We might have to go in and attach it, but it's not a death sentence. And my sister, who just had died the year earlier from colon cancer, I knew all about this colostomy bag. God was training me because I'm slow. He says, I'm going to prepare you for your daughter's circumstance. Well, we called our friends at harvest time. My wife's in the ambulance going at 120 miles an hour over to the cities, and we're going to have to get ready for surgery, and people are praying. And you go over into the NICU unit, and they have all these babies, and they're crying. And Jennifer's in there, and she's getting engorged for milk because all of these kids are crying. So she went to the hotel and left me there. You should have seen the look on the nurse's face when this beautiful young lady left great grandpa with this young child. I'm like, what are you doing? You can't leave that guy with a baby who's going to have surgery tomorrow. But they left. And one of the things growing up is my mother babysat. And that's one of my non-Christian gifts is children. And so I was singing to my daughter as the same way I sung to her every night in my wife's belly that I was home. And I never prayed so hard. And this is before I knew I was an intercessor. This was my very beginning of my journey as a Christian. And I prayed, and a lot of other people prayed. And I felt something in the diaper. And I said to the nurse, I think there's something here. And she goes, no, no. And she took the baby and went away. 4 hours later, I did the next feeding. She would only feed for me. She wouldn't feed for a nurse. She wouldn't feed for my wife. She only would feed for me because I would sing to her. And very unprofessional French-Canadian songs, just so you know. I'll teach them later. It's not to be taught in the open here. But the next time, I could feel something come out. And the nurse looked at me. She goes, no, there's something wrong. And I said, no, I'm going to change this diaper. And she's got wires and intravenous and this little baby who had already lost a pound. And there's a bowel movement. How was that possible? How was that possible, right? So, excuse me, I gotta wipe my nose. A little emotional about this one. So, the doctor came in. They took her down for an x-ray. It grew 6 inches. In 24 hours, my daughter's intestine grew 6 inches. So if I wasn't a believer, right? But if I wasn't a believer, maybe I wasn't going to pray as fervently as I prayed. And I wasn't the only one. We had so many people praying for us, right? 6 inches in 24 hours, right? How incredible. So we have a miracle child. And so I leave you with that story.
Thank you, John. I'm gonna make an assumption and speak for John. First of all, many of you that heard his message today, it probably stretched you in new ways, stretched you in directions that are challenging to you. I just want to assure you that a genuine faith in Jesus is the only way we're going to get through this.
That's right.
It's the only way we as a community are going to unite and get past what is a darkening world, right? So authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability is what you heard today, and that's a sign of leadership, and I know it's genuine. And I'm going to speak on John's behalf that he's approachable. If you want to hear more, know more, get more help, get more direction in this new journey, perhaps, you're open to that?
Absolutely.
And live for that?
Yeah. I love taking people to Chippewa Family Restaurant for lunch. Charlie knows that. And
do you buy?
Oh, he doesn't buy. I gotta buy. Yes, I buy every time. The one thing.
Hey, thank you for your patience. You've been really great. I wanted to mention something, a reminder that some folks are going to gather with Don in the corner to pray for this community, for the children. Also, we have an opportunity. The best $20 that you can spend today after you buy one of the books and you buy the couples tickets is we have a representative. Don is here from the Rotary Club. $20 for a dozen roses will be the best $20 you'll spend today. So you don't have to go home, but you can stay here. Thanks for coming. See you next month.